Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, April 1st, 2021, and today we'll be talking about the 2024 presidential election and a top Republican that is now pretty much laying the groundwork for a presidential run in 3 years from now. And before you ask, no, this is not an April Fool's video. I made one earlier today. I'm not going to hit you twice in the same day. We're actually going to be talking about something of true substance here, and today, we are going to be looking at Mike Pence's chances at winning the presidency in 2024 and how he stacks up relative to President Trump and what that could mean for a potential primary match between the two and potentially a primary victory for Mike Pence if Donald Trump chooses not to run for office in 2024. So Mike Pence, this is someone who served as Donald Trump's vice president from 2017 through 2021. Mike Pence fell out of favor from the national GOP after he certified the election victory for Joe Biden, moving the transition out of his hands and into the Biden administration. And, looking at what he's doing so far, according to numerous sources, I'm just using the Chicago Tribune because they're reporting on it, and it was the first link that I saw, but there were plenty of other news stories that covered this. But pretty much, Vice President Mike Pence has been doing a number of things. According to the Chicago Tribune, has been joining conservative organizations, writing op-eds, delivering speeches, and launching an advocacy group that will focus on promoting the Trump administration's accomplishments. Now, you typically don't do this if you just want to move into, isolation and remove yourself from the political world, which some people expected Mike Pence to do, but it seems to be clear that he's ramping up for something. Is it a 2022 bid? Who knows? Is it a 2024 presidential election bid? Who knows? But it looks as if this is going to be following very similar footsteps to Joe Biden and, a number of other former nominees. Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump was probably the only one who really didn't have his mindset on the presidency this far out. And, looking at what has been done here, it also reminds me of how Vice President Joe Biden, at the time, obviously President Biden now, decided to end up running for president in 2020. Denied initial claims, didn't really play into it, but was polling at a pretty large amount and recognized that he had some portion of the electorate in order to do that. And Joe Biden went on a book tour. He went around the country. He spoke in different venues. I remember that he visited Maryland, and I was going to go ahead and get tickets to go ahead and see him because, the former vice president would be very interesting to hear him speak, but they were sold out very quickly. And I never got to go see it, but he was here, and he was in plenty of other places around the country. We're talking, numerous places, and he was pretty much just getting the word out, pretty much arguing his point. And it was very clear from the beginning that Joe Biden wanted to run in 2020, if not 2016, 2020. And this is what's happening here with Mike Pence. I think there are very similar parallels here, and Mike Pence now seems to be trying to build his own brand, build his own campaign from the ground up. Many people expected him to be reliant on President Trump because President Trump is still the clear favorite for the 2024 presidential nomination, but he has fallen out of favor with Donald Trump. Following the Capitol insurrection, it was supposedly told that Mike Pence did not speak for Trump, to Trump for over a week after the Capitol insurrection, and I can see why. If you are looking out onto a sea of supporters that used to be, here voting for Mike Pence and Donald Trump, obviously with Trump at the top of the ticket, but then they bring out a noose. Then they start chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." How do you think you are going to react? If the person that's above you, the president of the United States, your one up, is encouraging this partially, feeding into this rhetoric because he's saying, I don't think Mike Pence has the courage to stand up to the election fraud. Mike Pence had no constitutional power. Donald Trump was setting him up, and Mike Pence recognized that. But at the end of the day, he took the fall for it. Mike Pence took the fall for it. And now it seems as if he has fallen out of favor amongst the Trump wing of the GOP. However, he's still favored more than Donald Trump on the national level. But when you look at these numbers, what do you notice? When Donald Trump is not on the ballot or a Trump name, meaning Donald Trump Jr. as well, Mike Pence takes the lead. Seriously, in every single one where Trump is not considered as a potential nominee, Mike Pence takes the lead with the exception of one from February and another from dating all the way back to November. So pretty much, I think that Mike Pence is looking at this and saying, holy crap, I still have a base. I still have a portion of the electorate that actually is considering electing me in 2024. So he's getting ready. And if you remember back in 2016, Mike Pence actually offered some type of balance to the Trump ticket, as he did in 2020. You see, what Mike Pence did was took a boisterous, very, yes, enthusiastic, but also very vocal candidate, Donald Trump, and then returned the American people to a sense of normalcy with the conservative movement. You know, he did that through his debates. He did that through his speeches. That's what Mike Pence was there for. He was to counteract the very, very wild personality of President Trump. And it worked in 2016. And if you remember the debates, I think that we all do. We pretty much remember exactly, the debates. In 2016, after this first debate, Hillary Clinton won with 62% according to viewers, meaning 62% of people who watched said she did a better job. 27% of them said Donald Trump. Now, this is a CNN poll, and you have to keep in mind that debate viewers on the TV screen typically lean to the left. Radio listeners typically lean to the right. However, that will make this next number even more shocking. You see, with this CNN number here, this result, Clinton won by a very large amount, by over 30 points. But then in the debate between Mike Pence and Tim Kaine, Mike Pence won by 6 points. With an audience that leans to the left, Mike Pence still took the lead. And he also outperformed Donald Trump yet again in 2020 in the debate. On the presidential level, Joe Biden won 60% to 28% in terms of debate viewers. Again, left-wing bias, but also something to compare to the results here. Kamala Harris was expected to win. This is still CNN. It's just formatted in a different way. You can see the source at the bottom left of the screen. But you see here that Mike Pence got 38% of people said he did better, just 28% for Donald Trump. And like I had said before, not only is the polling data telling us for the Republicans that Mike Pence would be the shoo-in if not Donald Trump, but it's also the approval rating numbers. Mike Pence is disapproved of by just 4 points nationwide. Donald Trump, however, is 14 points nationwide. That's a 10-point difference. When you're looking at the polls for Mike Pence versus Donald Trump, it seems clear that the American public likes Pence more than they do Trump. And that is something that Mike Pence might be looking at and saying, I can actually win this thing. However, Mike Pence won't be able to excite the same electorate as Donald Trump. If you looked at the shift from 2016, a lot of suburban and, pretty much just metropolitan areas moved to the left. But a lot of rural counties and majority minority counties moved to the right. The reason for that? I think there's two things. Number one, Joe Biden wasn't that enthusiastic candidate. He didn't inspire them the same way that Hillary Clinton did and the Democrats did in 2016, as crazy as that might seem. Secondly, I think the Democratic Party cried wolf in 2016. They promised minority voters that if Donald Trump was elected, their entire life would change. Their entire life would be upended. Well, for many minorities, maybe that was the case. But for others, it simply wasn't. For others, they saw very minimal changes in terms of their lives. Yes, they never agreed with Donald Trump on the national level. Maybe they didn't agree with some of his policies. They just didn't think that he was right for the country. But when the Democratic Party was saying, if he is elected, that's a doomsday scenario, and their lives didn't change that much, they're less inclined to vote for the party that tried to argue the same exact thing in 2020. Now, of course, the circumstances were different, which is why turnout was higher amongst people of color around the country. I'm sure, because of COVID-19, minorities were disproportionately affected by the virus. But you also have to realize that there's a reason why parts of Texas shifted 40 points. Other parts, Starr County, 55 points. Miami-Dade County shifted 22 points. There's a reason for that. These majority-minority counties, or counties with a very large Hispanic, Black, Native American, etc. population, Asian population, Pacific Islander, really any demographic group that's majority-minority, the main takeaway is that Joe Biden did better amongst white voters, but worse amongst minority voters. But ultimately, because white voters take up over 70% of the electorate, it was enough to land Joe Biden a victory. But the thing is, this won't work with Mike Pence. You see, Mike Pence is going to try to do a strategy that reminds us vaguely of 2012 and 2008. He is going to try to win back states that were won by traditional Republicans. Mitt Romney, John McCain, George Bush. These will be the blueprint Republicans for Mike Pence's bid. Yes, in a presidential primary, of course, he will want to win in the same way that Donald Trump did. He's going to want to win all the states Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, John Kasich did, on top of some Trump states. If Trump doesn't actually decide to run in 2024, it seems clear he's the favorite. But before we get into the strategy for Mike Pence if he is to make it to the general, let's talk about what a Donald Trump-Mike Pence matchup might actually give us. Well, we actually have some data here, with both Mike Pence and Donald Trump on the ballot. Well, what you'll notice is that Donald Trump seems to be taking away a large amount. When Donald Trump and Mike Pence are both on the ballot here in these polls, Donald Trump gets the majority of the vote and Mike Pence gets single digits. This happens twice. Mike Pence gets 9, Donald Trump gets 51. Mike Pence gets 8, Donald Trump gets 55. Another one, Harvard-Harris. Donald Trump gets 52, Mike Pence gets 18. Another one, Donald Trump gets 54, Mike Pence gets 12. But when Trump isn't on the ballot, Mike Pence takes the lead. But the thing here is that if Donald Trump was to face off against Mike Pence, I also want to remind people that Donald Trump doesn't need a majority here. He doesn't need to win the majority of votes. You see, the thing that's interesting about the Republican primary map is that it wasn't a reflection of the overall Republican polling data. It was not a reflection of the polling data. You see, what we saw happen with the polls in 2016 was that Donald Trump never got above 44% in the polls. When we saw the actual results, Donald Trump also never got a majority of the vote. The fact that he's doing that now means he will be set if he faces off against Mike Pence. And I think Mike Pence is counting on Donald Trump not running in 2024. So now that we move beyond that, main takeaway is that if Trump and Pence run, Trump is going to obliterate him. He obliterated the entire GOP field of 17-18 in 2016 without a majority. And the way that the GOP primary system works is that there are so many states that are winner take most, which means that Trump can win 33% of the vote and everyone else gets 30, and Trump still gets the majority of those delegates, or sometimes all of them, depending on the state. So if that was the matchup, Pence would be done. But let's move on as if Pence made it through the primary and Trump doesn't decide to run in 2024. So like I had said, Pence is going to try to tap in to that old Republican base. So what does that mean? That means rather than focus on the Rust Belt, rather than focus on the 3 states that Donald Trump flipped, Pence is going to go ahead and try to go into other states where the GOP historically has done well. That means states such as Georgia, states such as Arizona, holding on to Texas, holding on to North Carolina, potentially winning New Hampshire, potentially winning Nevada, states that were previously competitive and were competitive in 2020. That would be states that the GOP could potentially win without Donald Trump hindering their chances. You see, the thing is, looking at the 2020 map, Donald Trump helped the GOP in certain areas and hurt in others. Relative to 2012 versus 2020, Donald Trump helped in Iowa significantly. He helped in Ohio. He helped in Florida. He didn't help in Texas, though. He didn't help in North Carolina or Georgia or Arizona. Or, he did help in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But you see, without Donald Trump in this instance, if Mike Pence truly can tap into those Republican states from the past, it denies the Democratic Party from winning the presidency. Let's see what happens when you characterize all of those states, remaining that were won by Trump in 2016. So I'm going to include Iowa, I'm going to include Ohio, and I'm going to include Florida for this sake. Well, what you see is that we're at 265 electoral votes. It would be a win through New Hampshire and Nevada. In fact, New Hampshire could technically go ahead and go blue, or even, I'm just going to put it in the toss-up column for the sake of this, and the Republicans would still win. But it also is an uphill climb because I can't imagine that Mike Pence would do better amongst minorities in Nevada than Donald Trump. But let's say those minority voters don't actually rebound the way we expect them to, but white voters do. Well, then Mike Pence could actually win Nevada. While the Republicans will not win Colorado or Virginia or New Mexico, we could see a narrowing up. Colorado could go back to being lean, as could Virginia. Minnesota could as well. The Democrats might be able to do well, but they won't be able to win, at least without winning over those states, obviously, from 2016 and 2020. You see, if the Republicans win Nevada and New Hampshire, that's an indicator that the party has made inroads in areas that they weren't able to do so. And if anyone was to do it, it wouldn't be Donald Trump, but rather it would be Mike Pence, because he returns us to a sense of normalcy within the GOP. Rather than be the party of outspoken, rallies and speeches and baseless claims of election fraud, Mike Pence would bring us back to the times of Mitt Romney and John McCain, where it seemed very much less polarized. Even though that may not necessarily have been the case, I think we were less polarized in 2008 and 2012 because the American people had a general consensus of who they wanted in power. 2020 and 2016 were a little bit different. 2020, I think we were the most polarized because of the pandemic. Not in history, but at least in the 21st century as of right now. And looking at what Mike Pence could do, sure, he could reverse some of these states back to being competitive, but that's a big if. If the Republicans aren't able to appeal to the Rust Belt the same way Donald Trump is, Mike Pence runs the risk of losing with just the Democrats winning the Clinton states and the 3 Rust Belt states, which is completely doable. I would not be shocked if this was a map in 2024 if Mike Pence was the nominee, because it's not far-fetched to see how it could actually happen. But it does come down to who's running. It does come down to whether or not Mike Pence went through a rocky primary. It also depends on who he chooses as vice president. But what we're seeing here now is that Pence is laying the groundwork. He's getting ready. He wants to run in 2024, or so it seems. He declined to comment on this story, but it seems to be very real. It seems to be very clear based off what he's doing so far. He's going ahead and joining conservative organizations. He's founding his own to flaunt what he did with the Trump administration. This is exactly what Biden did. This is exactly what Clinton did. And it's very clear. This is exactly what Romney did. This is so evident that this is Mike Pence's starting point. He wants to build up this brand over the next few years, get in good with the conservatives, and then ask for their endorsements in 2 years from now. And I think it'll work. I really do think it'll work. But do I think he'll do well in the general? First of all, it comes down to whether or not he ran against Trump in the primary. And second of all, it comes down to whether or not he chooses a good vice presidential candidate. Because while Mike Pence may be able to return us to a sense of normalcy was Mitt Romney and John McCain, and they both lost. So it really depends. It really depends on what Mike Pence can do and who he can excite. And honestly, looking at Mike Pence's energy and enthusiasm, I'm not super hopeful that he will be the best nominee in 2024 or necessarily a good nominee in 2024. He could win in states. The GOP seemed to have been unable to do so in 2020, but that doesn't guarantee a victory given Joe Biden's heavy buffer at 306 electoral votes. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. This was not an April Fool's video. I'm just making one because I didn't want to do a second April Fool's video on the same day, obviously. So this is a very genuine video, and it's just covering what's in the news right now. So again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.